A lion is hunting you. This is the scenario that shaped human evolution, not the dramatic chase you'd expect. The cat has advantages you can't match. It's faster, stronger, built for predation in ways your body simply isn't. But you're not running. You're walking backward, maintaining eye contact, holding a branch with fire at the end. The lion circles. It wants to charge, but something about your behavior is confusing it. You're not acting like prey. Prey runs in panic or freezes in terror. You're standing still, controlling the flames, meeting its gaze. The lion is a better predator than you are. It's more lethal. But right now, in this moment, you're winning. Not because you're stronger, but because the lion can't understand what it's looking at. It can't parse your intentions. It can't predict what the fire will do. You've removed yourself from the category of prey through a combination of technology and psychological manipulation. The lion, for all its evolutionary advantage, can't adapt to this scenario because it requires understanding something the lion's brain isn't built to process. You've won the encounter through something no amount of muscle mass could match: the ability to think in ways that made your behavior unpredictable. Humans became the dominant species on the planet not through strength or speed, not through specialized adaptations to specific environments, not through any biological advantage that would impress an engineer. We became dominant through a cognitive capacity that was so specific and so powerful that it allowed us to adapt to any environment, predict and manipulate the behavior of other species, and coordinate with each other at scales that no other animal could match. This capacity was so fundamental that it rewired how human societies function, how we experience consciousness, how we relate to reality itself. The forbidden secret is that this capacity isn't intelligence in the way we usually define it. A human isn't smarter in any absolute sense than a chimpanzee or a dolphin. But humans can do something those animals can't. We can imagine things that don't exist and convince other humans that the imagined things are real. The distinction seems subtle until you understand its implications. You can teach another human about a water source that exists 10 days' walk away, in a direction they've never traveled, and they'll believe you. They'll organize an expedition based entirely on your description. A chimpanzee can't do this. It can learn about locations it's experienced directly. It can remember them. It can return to them. But it can't learn about a place from purely linguistic description and trust that description enough to journey toward it. This capacity, the ability to transmit information about non-existent or unseen things and have other humans trust and act on that information, creates a mechanism for collective learning that no other species possesses. Knowledge doesn't die with the individual. It's externalized into language, into stories, into culture. The next generation doesn't start from zero. It starts from the accumulated knowledge of everyone who came before. Look at what this capacity created. A human group encounters a new environment. The first generation makes mistakes. Some strategies work. Others fail. People die. The survivors learn. They develop techniques for finding water in deserts, for hunting specific animals, for processing toxic plants to make them edible. This knowledge is transmitted to the next generation through stories and instruction. The next generation doesn't have to rediscover everything. They inherit solutions. They build on them. Within 5 generations, the group has developed sophisticated techniques for surviving in an environment that would seem impossible to the first humans who arrived there. Across 10,000 years, Humans have occupied every terrestrial environment on the planet, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest to high mountains to deep deserts. A species with inferior biological adaptations to all of those environments, yet present in all of them. Only language-based knowledge transmission makes this possible. But language and knowledge transmission alone don't explain human dominance. Many species have forms of communication. Many species teach their young. What makes humans different is the next layer. The ability to imagine things that don't currently exist and convince others to help bring them into being. You can describe a hunting strategy that you've never actually executed. You can describe it in enough detail that others can visualize it. They can identify problems with it. You can modify it based on their input. The strategy exists first as language, then as imagination, then as coordinated action. A group of humans can cooperatively execute a plan that no individual invented, that none of them have done before, that emerged from collective conversation. This requires not just language, but the capacity to hold imagined scenarios in mind and discuss them as if they were real. This capacity gets magnified across generations. An ancestor develops a technique, say, making a better axe. They describe it. Others copy it. They add small modifications. Someone else has an insight about a different material that works better. Across generations, the technology improves, not because any individual is a genius, but because solutions accumulate. 50 generations of small improvements create tools that are radically more sophisticated than the original. The same process happened with hunting strategies, with shelter design, with food preparation, with navigation, with every domain of human activity. Cumulative cultural evolution created capabilities that no biological evolution could match. You can't evolve a brain large enough to store all the knowledge needed to be a successful Polynesian navigator through biological means. But you can transmit it through cultural training, through stories, through practiced techniques. The knowledge exists in the culture, externalized, accumulating. The second layer of human cognitive dominance is something we might call theory of mind on steroids. A chimpanzee can predict the behavior of another chimpanzee to some degree. It understands that the other individual has goals and intentions. But the sophistication is limited. A human can model not just another person's current goals, but their false beliefs, their misconceptions, their psychological biases, their long-term plans. More importantly, you can deliberately manipulate someone's beliefs. You can tell them something false and watch them act on the false information. You can predict that they'll act on it. This is the foundation of everything from deception to leadership to political systems. A human can convince another human to do something against their immediate self-interest because the human doing the convincing understands how beliefs work and how to shape them. The evidence for this capacity appears in prehistoric art and behavior. The Venus figurines, carved from ivory and stone across Europe tens of thousands of years ago, probably served no practical purpose. They weren't tools. They didn't keep anyone warm or provide food. But they were created repeatedly, across thousands of years, by different populations separated by vast distances. Why? One possibility is that they were designed to shape people's beliefs about fertility and female sexuality. A group could display these figurines during rituals meant to encourage conception. The figurines don't do anything directly, but they help create a psychological state of focus on fertility, an embodiment of the desired outcome. The same logic applies to cave paintings. The animals depicted aren't there, but painting them creates a psychological connection to hunting success. It creates a rehearsal mechanism. It potentially creates a ritual space where the group collectively focuses on upcoming hunts. The manipulation of belief extends into the realm of creating shared fiction. Money doesn't have intrinsic value. A piece of paper or a digital number only works as currency because millions of people believe it has value and are willing to trade goods and services for it. The shared fiction is enormously powerful. It allows cooperation at massive scales. Humans who have never met can cooperate on projects spanning decades because they share fictional frameworks about property, about authority, about the purpose of the organization. This capacity to create and maintain shared fiction is completely unique to humans. No other species has the capacity to organize itself around concepts that don't have physical reality. Deception becomes possible at a sophisticated level. A human can tell another human a lie and have the listener believe it. More importantly, the liar can predict how the false information will spread, can anticipate what the listener will do with it, can set up situations where the listener's false beliefs will lead to specific outcomes. This capacity for sophisticated deception is a major component of human dominance. Throughout history, the humans who have been most successful at manipulating others either through charisma, rhetoric, or deliberate deception have often risen to positions of power. The capacity that allows civilization to function shared fictional frameworks. Trust in institutions. Belief in authority is the same capacity that allows sophisticated manipulation of that same civilization. But here's where the dark dimension becomes visible. The capacity to imagine things that don't exist and convince others that they're real enabled the creation of religions. It enabled the construction of moral systems that could motivate people to act against immediate self-interest. It enabled the creation of ideologies that could justify atrocities. Humans went to war for centuries over interpretations of religious texts, over slightly different visions of the divine, over shared fictions that they truly believed inches. No other species wages war over metaphysical disputes. No other species kills each other in the name of abstract principles. The capacity for abstract thought, for imagining non-existent things, for manipulating others' beliefs, enabled humans to be simultaneously more cooperative than any other species and more viciously violent than almost any predator. We're the only species that can convince itself that committing mass murder is righteous. The fourth element of human cognitive dominance is what we might call recursive or second-order thinking. You can think about thinking. You can anticipate what someone will anticipate that you're going to do. You can plan against their counterplans. This creates an infinite regression of strategic depth. In chess, a human master thinks 10 moves ahead. An even stronger player thinks about what their opponent thinks they'll do 10 moves ahead. The best players are thinking about their opponents, thinking about their thinking. This kind of nested intentionality creates extraordinary strategic complexity. It allows humans to win conflicts not through direct force, but through psychological manipulation. You don't have to be stronger. You just have to be smarter about how the other person thinks and what they'll anticipate. The evidence for this capacity appears in the evolution of warfare. Early human conflicts were probably straightforward: two groups fight. Whoever has more warriors or better weapons wins. But as human societies became more complex, so did military strategy. By the time of recorded history, warfare involved elaborate deception, feints, fake encampments, false intelligence designed to manipulate enemy expectations. The Roman general, who could best predict how his enemy would react, who could anticipate countermoves and prepare for them, who could manipulate his enemy into making mistakes through psychological pressure. That general was the most successful. Intelligence and strategic sophistication mattered more than brute strength. This was already true by the time of recorded history, which means it was probably true far earlier. But acknowledging human dominance as based on cognitive capacity requires also acknowledging fundamental uncertainties about how these capacities actually work. We don't fully understand consciousness, language, or imagination. We can observe their effects, but the underlying mechanisms remain mysterious. We can measure brain size and neural connections, but we don't know exactly why human brains developed the way they did. Was it a specific mutation? A combination of mutations? Environmental pressure? Sexual selection? Probably all of these, but the precise contributions remain unknown. We can document that humans have these capacities, but explaining why humans and no other species developed them to this degree is still unsolved. Moreover, the emphasis on human cognitive dominance might understate the role of luck and circumstance. Humans might not be uniquely suited for language and abstract thought. Other species might be. The difference might be timing. Humans developed language before they encountered other cognitive equals. If species X had evolved language before humans, it might have achieved dominance instead. Or humans might have been eliminated by environmental catastrophe or competition from another species before developing these capacities. The fact that we're here, successful, crediting our success to cognitive capacity, might say more about selection bias than about our actual superiority. Species that didn't develop sophisticated cognition weren't here to tell their side of the story. There's also the question of whether the supposed cognitive advantages are actually advantages or just different. A dolphin has sophisticated social cognition, communication, and perhaps even self-awareness. But it didn't create language as we understand it, didn't develop technology, didn't establish agriculture or build cities. Does this mean the dolphin's cognition is inferior? Or does it mean that dolphin cognition is optimized for a completely different set of problems? The dolphin is remarkably successful in its ecological niche. It survives, reproduces, maintains complex social relationships. From the dolphin's perspective, its cognition works perfectly well. The fact that it doesn't create abstract civilizations is irrelevant if you're a dolphin living in the ocean. The resolution is that humans achieved dominance through a specific constellation of cognitive capacities that happen to be particularly useful for terrestrial expansion and social complexity. This constellation wasn't inevitable. It's not the peak of some predetermined hierarchy of intelligence. It's just what happened to work for humans in the particular environments we occupied, in the particular history we lived through. The capacities are powerful, so powerful that they allowed humans to reshape ecosystems, create civilizations, and eventually threaten the biosphere itself. But they're also fragile and sometimes counterproductive. The same capacity for creating shared fiction that enables cooperation also enables mass delusion. The same recursive thinking that allows strategic brilliance also enables us to rationalize almost anything. The capacity to imagine futures that don't exist is what drives progress, but it's also what drives anxiety and depression. What's worth recognizing is that these capacities didn't make humans better in any absolute moral sense. They just made us different. They made us capable of things no other animal is capable of, for better and for worse. We built cathedrals and libraries. We also built concentration camps. We created music and mathematics. We also created weapons designed to kill as many people as possible. We developed medicine and extended lifespans. We also created toxins and poisons. The secret that humans outsmarted every other species on Earth isn't really a secret. And it's not something to be proud of. It's just what happened. We developed cognitive capacities that were powerful and flexible enough to dominate our planet. Whether that dominance is ultimately good or catastrophic remains to be determined. What matters is understanding how it happened, not congratulating ourselves for it. When you look at human history through this lens, as the history of minds learning to manipulate reality through language and shared fiction, you see patterns that aren't visible otherwise. The arc of human progress isn't primarily technological. It's cognitive. The technology follows. The real breakthroughs were conceptual. The development of agriculture required imagining that you could deliberately plant seeds and harvest crops, that you could manipulate nature to your benefit. Democracy required imagining that ordinary people could rule themselves. Science required imagining that reality operates according to discoverable laws that can be expressed mathematically. Each of these required humans to imagine something that hadn't existed before and convince others that the imagination was worth making real. And each time, the new imagined system became more powerful and more complex. The question that emerges from understanding this is what happens next. Humans develop the capacity to imagine futures and make them real. We've done that repeatedly throughout history. But now we're imagining futures that might not be survivable: climate change, nuclear warfare, AI systems that we don't fully understand. We're still using the same cognitive capacities that made us successful thousands of years ago. But the scale has changed. A mistake by a tribal leader affected that tribe. A mistake by a modern leader affects millions. Our capacity to imagine and implement change has become more dangerous, not because our minds have become worse, but because the systems they control have become more powerful. The forbidden secret isn't that humans outsmarted every other species. The secret might be that we've created capacities we don't fully understand, and that might be impossible to control. Understanding how you got here, how your ancestors climbed to dominance through the manipulation of language and belief, might be the first step toward understanding what you do with that dominance before it destroys you.